Thank you for giving up your time this afternoon for this, the third of our discussions. We've got a series of questions. I know these are really uncertain times, and I know the situation is very fluid, and we need some clarity in some aspects of some of this. But I thought it was useful just for us to have some exchanges and for me to put some questions, and we can return to these issues, and we will, I'm sure, as we move forward. So if you're okay, I'll make a start.
Yes, of course.
Following the government's update on COVID regulations and recognising that new guidance has emerged this week, which will allow workers who can't work from home to go to work, and for people to take more exercise than has previously been allowed, what are the key messages the force would want to reiterate to the public at this time?
Well, we're awaiting guidance from the College of Policing. The regulations are currently in draft formats. We expect more information from the College of Policing in the coming days. I think it's important that Cleveland Police's stance mirrors that of the police nationally. And so we'll be in a better position to inform what the policing stance should be and any guidelines that the police have in the days to come. But I anticipate that coming through in the next few days.
Okay. As the PCC and as Chief Constable, we know that many people might be tempted to call 101 or 999 to seek guidance about the new stay alert rules, etc. And what message would you wish to give to people who are tempted to do this?
Well, of course, it's important that members of the public do continue to call us if there are matters regarding crime and the other issues that they've always called us about, whether that's missing people, people who feel they're vulnerable and need support. So those conversations and those phone calls should continue to happen, and to contact Cleveland Police in any of the ways that they have previously. When it comes to guidance around issues relating to COVID, it's important that members of the public visit the gov.uk website and any of the other public service broadcasters that are able to provide the information. What Cleveland Police can't do is offer advice on guidance. That's not the role of the police service more generally, and it's important that they look to those other areas in public life, such like I say as gov.uk, for any guidance that they have. We are unable to offer that advice ahead of time.
Okay, thanks. Travel and the use of public spaces has been a hot topic within our local community. What do the changes that will be emerging mean to your approach to enforcement, and what changes do you expect to take place regarding the level of fines?
So we know that the fines are being increased in terms of the monetary value of those fines. It'll increase to £50 if they're paid early, or £100 if they're not, and those fines can increase dependent on how many breaches there are over any given time, of course. So because of that, guidance is yet to come out yet, which is around the policing style around those issues. It's difficult to provide that ahead of time, but we do anticipate that the 4 E's approach, which starts with engagement, encouragement and enforcement, continue, that enforcement is an option for us, but that comes very much at the end of that scale. So the policing response style will be much as they have, but obviously it will differ because now people are able, in England at least, to do a great deal more than they have in the weeks previously.
Okay, understood. The new guidance states that you can exercise as many times as you wish and drive to open spaces irrespective of distance, and as long as it doesn't involve contact with people outside of the household. How will you reassure people who live in the more rural areas and in popular public destinations like parks and riverbanks that Cleveland Police will ensure people do not flout the rules?
Well, we continue to police in our rural areas and offer advice as best we can to the residents in those areas about COVID-related issues, but those that travel to those areas as well. We are bound to see an increase in travel to those types of areas, as obviously travelling to exercise is permitted. In terms of the question and not being allowed to meet with members outside your household, you will be able to, of course, but in very limited circumstances. One person from your household can meet with one other person from another household. So it's not quite right to say that you can't meet with anybody outside your household. That is an issue which is being relaxed as well. But as I say, the background and the guidance that surround that will be something that emerges in the next few days and provide people with the reassurance they need as to what they can and can't do.
Okay, thanks. It'll be a difficult balance to police the roads, I would imagine, with more people travelling to work and for exercise. How will you ensure that you undertake this difficult task reasonably and proportionately and fairly, bearing in mind more people may be travelling for what are genuine purposes?
So there are many more legitimate uses of for use of the road now than there have been in the week previously. As you mentioned, that people will now be allowed to travel, to exercise, etc. The approach to policing the roads will be much like it has always been here in Cleveland Police. So I don't anticipate there being much change, despite, of course, we have seen week on week an increase in the number of people using our roads. So we do use ANPR data and an intelligent policing of those main arterial routes and our smaller roads as well to make sure that people are using the roads in the way that they should. But of course, there are so many more reasons that people are allowed to be out of the house now that we will need a different type of approach to policing the roads. But again, I would hope in the guidance that's emerging in the next few days that there is some further information that we can provide in terms of how the policing style might change in that regard. But inevitably, there will be a legitimate increase in use of the road now by our members of the public.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to ask a few more general questions now. Protecting the vulnerable within our communities has been key from the outset. What work will you continue to do to ensure the safety and welfare of those people living within Cleveland? So
protecting the vulnerable is something that we do in any case, whether that's pre-COVID or during the times of COVID. So we will continue to do the types of things we have, which is to respond to domestic abuse incidents, and we'd encourage people to keep calling us on any of the policing responses that they do require outside of COVID, because we have seen a drop in our demand. So in terms of the way that we police Cleveland, that doesn't change because of COVID. The fact that COVID is with us means that the demand on our services has changed, but we are still responding to all of those vulnerable people we have in our communities. And of course, we have a number of third sector agencies and partner agencies who do that work in conjunction with us. So in terms of policing vulnerable people and assisting vulnerable people, there'll be no change in the provision that we provide here in Cleveland Police. We are very much open for business.
Good. Thank you. A question that's been asked before, but I'd like to re-put it again. Have police officers and staff got the personal protective equipment they need so they can go about their work, keeping people safe and working safely themselves?
So we do have PPE for our staff, and we employ social distancing measures and other issues around cleanliness in some of our people working in offices as well. So we have PPE and other measures available. PPE is obviously something which we continuously are trying to source. We do have enough, but that is very much a changing feast. So we have to make sure that our procedures and policies are in place to keep that coming through, because of course it's an expendable resource that changes. And guidance changes as well. So we do have what we need for today and tomorrow and the days that follow, but we're very mindful that guidance can change. So as things stand, we are getting the PPE that our staff need. And that's been an incredible effort right across the nation, led by MHCLG, the government department, and more locally through the LRS. And that partnership between government and the local LRF has meant that we are getting PPE to all of the places that it needs. There will always be one or two areas, of course, and on a micro level that require more, and we can address that need. But it really has been a national effort in terms of PPE.
And you've been able to get quite a lot of that from local suppliers?
Yes, yeah, local suppliers very much play a part in the demand that we have here and in servicing that demand. So there's a mixture between local suppliers and the stuff nationally, of course, but we are getting what we need.
Cleveland Police has been playing a key role on the multi-agency local resilience forum, and I know you've played a significant role within that, Richard, which has led the partnership response to COVID-19. What partnership is underway to make sure the new rules will work smoothly to keep Cleveland safe?
Well, the strategic coordinating group, both regionally for the Northeast, which I'm chairing this week, and more locally for the Cleveland area, run on a regular basis, as they always have. The guidance was published, or some of the guidance at least was published on Monday by the Prime Minister. That's in the process of being digested now and will be considered at the strategic coordinating groups tomorrow. But of course, there's more guidance that we're expecting on individual agency basis for the police service, for example, emerging in the days to come as well. So the SCG will consider the guidance and how best to enact that in our local area. There needs to be a national response to this, of course. We need to be there to be as little change between here and every other area within England for this particular guidance, of course, because it's different than the devolved administrations. But we anticipate that the strategic coordinating group will play a role in ensuring that the guidance is adhered to. Yeah,
thanks. We know some changes to the law being made during the course of this week, and it's important that Cleveland Police provides clear messages about what this means for the policing of Cleveland. For example, what can people be challenged about and given tickets for, and so on. How do you plan to communicate with our communities about any changes to the law?
Well, we're still digesting very much what was released yesterday. We await the College of Policing guidance and further information from government around policing and policing style, which does need to be led nationally, and ensuring that, again, there is no postcode lottery in the way that these changes are enacted. But in terms of communicating with the public, as soon as we have a firm understanding of what it is we can and can't do, what we will and won't do, then we'll make sure that we communicate that via all our social media platforms, but understanding as well that not everybody's on social media, and ensuring where we can that information is via public service broadcasters and others. Anybody who will listen to us, we will speak to them on a collective basis, of course, with the broadcasters, to ensure that message gets as wide as it possibly can. And that also can be facilitated through our local neighbourhood policing teams in a more localised area. But again, this is not a policing response. This is a multi-agency response. And it's important, of course, that we work in concert with our partners, local authorities, for example, and others, to make sure that the messaging is consistent across us all.
Good. Thank you. Cleveland Police had a busy bank holiday weekend last weekend with around 1,200 calls, I think, many of which were COVID related. Do you think the messages are getting through to people in terms of what they can and can't do?
Well, that changes this week, of course. So the bank holiday weekend would have been a different set of regulations to the one that are pretty much starting tomorrow in England. And so the messages we felt previously were getting through. There's now understandably, a new set of messages which we now need to ensure that the public understand and adhere to. So I think the message was getting through. The number of calls we're getting related to COVID were around breaches, and where we can't, we respond to those, of course. And so we now start with a slightly different variation of those rules this week. So it's up to us and indeed all of our partners to make sure that those rules are well understood by our public. But generally speaking, I think the public did an extraordinary job in adhering to the social distancing measures, not just in Cleveland, but right across the country. And we should be proud of the role that we have played here in Cleveland and Teesside more generally in adhering to that guidance. Yeah, thanks.
A last question from me. Like most police forces, Cleveland has adopted the 4 E's approach to policing in relation to COVID-19: engage, explain, encourage, and only enforcing with fines as a last resort. Has this been successful, and do you envisage this overall approach changing something?
Well, the 4 E's, again, the College of Policing, I don't think will change that, but we do await that new guidance. But if that doesn't change, the 4 E's approach, no matter what the new regulations would be, is one that we maintain, very much engaging and encouraging and educating before we move on to enforcement. There will be those, of course, who just do not adhere to the guidance, and enforcement will be something that we might move straight towards, as opposed to starting an engagement if, for example, there have been repeat offenders. And so it is up to individual police officers to make that call for themselves. He or she might decide that enforcement is the first thing that needs to happen because of a history that they will be aware of. But most of the time, as of course right across the country has been the case, that is very much in the first 3 E's that a lot of our work is conducted, which is on engagement. We need to make sure that we have a relationship with our communities that stretches way beyond the COVID crisis. And so working with them is important, as opposed to moving straight to enforcement on a regular basis. But of course, each officer will have within their discretion to do that if they really need to.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. As I said at the start, these are very challenging times. They're very uncertain times. We know that there is more information to come over the next day or two, and that will need more work from yourself and your colleagues. I would endorse the work you've done so far in terms of enforcement. I think it's been fair and proportionate, and I think the public think it's fair and proportionate. And I think the public also think that you and all your officers and staff and volunteers have done an excellent job in very difficult circumstances. So on my behalf and on their behalf, I'd like to thank you all for the great work that you're doing. And I'm sure we'll return to these issues in the not too distant future. But thanks again for giving up the time. And I'm sure the public will be that bit better informed as a result of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.